What happens when you run out of weapons but not ideas? When bullets and tanks and doctrine have been chewed up by mud and steel, what do you do next? You get dangerous in the best way. Improvisation. Imagine this: no sleek fighter, no secret bomber, just a lumbering delivery plane, a crate hauler built for comfort and cargo, not combat. Now imagine bolting a cannon inside it, strapping armor to its floor, turning a gentle workhorse into something that prowls the sky like a floating gunboat. It sounds insane. It sounds desperate. But desperation breeds invention, and on a cold, tired airstrip, that kind of madness can become a weapon. Late 1944, the bitter European winter had ground the Allied advance to a halt. Roads turned to quagmires of mud. Fields were white graves of snow and iron. Supply convoys slogged for days. Men froze in foxholes. And the biggest threat wasn't the cold, it was armor. German panzers, heavy and disciplined, cutting through American formations with ruthless efficiency. They rolled like a steel tide, smashing hedgerows, overrunning anti-tank positions, turning towns into choke points. Air cover helped sometimes, but when the tanks came, the front line felt naked. Doctrine offered no easy answer. Desperation began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, someone would have to improvise. The skies offered little relief. Fighter bombers like the P-47 Thunderbolt were lethal, brutal in a single pass, but utterly fleeting. They screamed in like thunder, spat fire, and were gone, leaving a silence full of small, burning things on the ground. Pilots had one run, then fuel, weather, and orders pulled them away. Flak and cloud cut sorties short. Men in foxholes learned to count on a single heartbeat of help, and then on their own. So on that rain-soaked airstrip, watching a lumbering transport trudge into the gray, the exhausted engineers began to ask a dangerous question. What if the plane itself could stay and fight? It's a rainy, bone-deep kind of cold on the airstrip, water drumming on canvas, mud sucking at boots, and a cluster of engineers stands huddled under a single, leaking awning, eyes locked on a lumbering C-47 as it taxis and lifts, clumsy and terrible and somehow beautiful. There's spent grease under their nails, coffee gone cold, but they watch like it's a deliverance. The Skytrain isn't sleek or armed. It's a 1,930 seconds workhorse, fabric and aluminum, engines coughing, no armor to hide behind. It carries food, wounded men, hope. It was never meant for fighting. It was meant to carry things, not to break things. They call it the Gooney Bird, old, reliable, and almost embarrassingly humble. It hauls ammunition crates and canned rations, paratroopers snug in canvas seats, and stretchers full of men who smell of blood and winter. The engines thrum like a tired beast. The floorboards creak under 1,000 small, urgent steps. It wasn't designed for combat. No armor plates, no heavy guns bolted to its ribs, just aluminum, canvas, and the stubborn faith of pilots who know how to coax lift from thin air. It carries people and hope. It does not haul weapons. It is prey, not a predator. It starts small, a bitter laugh, a tossed-off line to cut the cold. What if, they joke, the Gooney Bird could fight back? Inside that damp hangar, the air tastes like oil and exhaustion. Boots scuffing on concrete, breath fogging in the light. The joke lands and should die. Instead, it finds ears. Faces go quiet. Someone sketches a ridiculous picture with a grease-stained finger on a crate. The absurdity blooms into a question that won't be shrugged away. It feels like madness. And yet in that sudden hush, you can almost hear the gears of a dangerous idea begin to turn. It starts as a joke, two tired men trading gallows humor to cut the cold. Then one of them stops laughing and says it out loud. What if we put a cannon inside the cargo plane? the words hang there, ridiculous and terrible, bouncing off oil-streaked metal and the drip of condensation from the rafters. For a beat, everyone smiles because it's absurd. Then the smile fades. They picture the lumbering C-47, its cavernous hold, and a single brutal idea taking shape. Not just a pipe dream, but a how-to problem waiting to be solved. In that hush, the joke becomes a plan. It sounds insane. The C-47 was never built for combat, slow, lumbering, aluminum skin thin as paper, fragile, a sitting duck. Mount a 75mm cannon inside, and you don't get a new weapon. You get a flying coffin. Every rule of air warfare screams no. Fighters dive, fire, and disappear. This thing would stay. Its silhouette would be a beacon to every flak battery for miles. Call it bravery or call it madness. The picture is the same. Men and metal leaned against a steel wall with little hope. And yet, when the line ahead is being chewed up, even madness starts to look like a plan. But the mood in the hangar curdles when the latest frontline dispatches come through. Towns overrun, convoys ambushed, men pinned down by armored columns that chew through armor and morale alike. Casualty lists arrive in neat stacks. Faces once animated by banter now stare hollow into their cups. Fighter cover is scarce. Weather and fuel clip the P-47 seconds wings, and every tactical manual suddenly reads like a luxury. Doctrine, the rules that used to feel sacred, snaps under the weight of bodies and cold mud. When every conventional answer has been tried and failed, a ridiculous, dangerous idea stops being a joke and becomes, brutally, the only plan left. It's a small discovery, almost an accident, a yellowed photo here, a terse British memorandum there, but it changes everything. The Brits had already fiddled with armed transports, and the B-25H Mitchell had actually carried a 75mm cannon into combat and lived to tell the tale. Suddenly, the madness isn't so mad. The math becomes possible. If a twin-engine medium bomber could absorb that recoil and punch through armor, then maybe, just maybe, a lumbering C-47 could too, with the right armor, the right cradle, and a willingness to trash every rule in the book. The engineers stop joking. Their mission snaps into focus. Steal the idea, adapt it, and push it to the absolute limit. The decision comes quick, almost ugly in its clarity. There are no orders coming, only bodies on the line and time running out, so they stop waiting and start building. It's illegal, it's reckless, and it might just work. They scrounge tools, steel, the one weapon that might matter. They pick a 75mm M4 cannon, the same gun that turned Shermans into killers, because nothing else promises the punch to stop a panzer. Men who've never been guerrillas become thieves of necessity, slipping the gun out of depots and wreck yards, hiding it like contraband as the secret project quietly begins. They pick one plane, a tired C-47 Skytrain, pulled off the transport line and marked for workaday duty, becomes their patient. Worn paint, dents, and patched skin. In the hangar, the engineers gather wrenches and wire, scrap, and stubbornness. They stack courage with coffee, know the odds, and still move forward. There is no turning back now. The first step is deconstruction. They strip the C-47's cargo hold down to skin and frame seats hauled out, nets and crates shoved aside, every panel pried free until only the aluminum ribs remain. Headlamps cut through grime, tools clink against metal. The space yawns open, cavernous and echoing, not empty but expectant like a throat, waiting to swallow a cannon-made heart. Now comes the impossible math. How do you fire a tank cannon from inside a thin aluminum tube without the force of the blast tearing the whole airplane apart in mid-air? The cargo hold is already a skeleton of ribs and rivets. Every beam has a limit. Recoil isn't a theory here. It's a violent shove that can rip bolts, buckle skin, and yaw the fuselage into a fatal spin. They must choke the recoil, spread the load, and keep the center of gravity from wandering into danger. That means armor plates, cradle mounts, hydraulic dampers, and calculations done on the back of a greasy lunch pail, or else the first shot will be the last. Working through the night, fueled by coffee and sheer will, they strip salvage yards and bomber graveyards alike, headlamps slicing the dark as they haul dented B-25 armor plates back to the hangar. Men grunt, welders spit sparks, and mechanics bend steel with improvised jigs until the plates sit like patchwork armor. They bolt and rivet them to the C-47's thin floor, and along the fuselage seams ugly, noisy, half science, half prayer. But suddenly the Gooney Bird feels like it might survive a fight. They measure, mark, and cut with military precision sheets of scavenged armor screaming under the grinder. Sparks arc like brief, angry stars as welded seams fuse steel to aluminum. Piece by piece, they build a heavy cradle to seat the 75mm M4 bolting iron into the fragile belly of the Skytrain. The old transport groans. Rivets complain under the new weight. Their greatest challenge was the cannon's violent recoil. Every extra plate, every welded brace could only do so much. One miscalculation, and that 75mm blast would rip through the thin aluminum skin, yank out ribs, tear open the floor, and turn the crew's home into a tomb. You could see it in their faces, the tired pilots, the grease-streaked engineers, all picturing that first thunderous shot not as triumph, but as an airframe shredding catastrophe. Tank recoil is borne by steel and earth. A C-47's fuselage is fragile. If this bird was going to survive firing, they would have to tame that recoil fast. They'd jury-rig a tangle of hydraulic recoil dampers, taping together salvaged pistons, hoses, and B-25 scraps, then run the numbers on the back of a cigarette pack. Every calculation is hope. Every weld and every bolt is a gamble. If the math's wrong, the cannon will chew the airframe alive. If it's right, a humble transport becomes a weapon, and the front gets a miracle. With the cannon finally bolted into the belly of the C-47, a new nightmare presents itself: ammunition. Those 75mm shells are not mere bullets. They're heavy, awkward, and lethal if they shift. They need to be locked down, easy to reach, and fed into the breech fast, under turbulence and under fire. There are no drawings, no manuals, just scared pilots and grease-stained engineers asking how to store tons of explosive metal without turning the plane into a flying bomb. They had no manual, only necessity, and so they built one. Steel rails ripped from a B-25 wreck became cradles for the heavy 75mm shells. Battered oil drums were cut into padded holders. Canvas straps and rubber strops kept rounds from sliding in a hard turn. A sprocket-driven ram and chute, scavenged from a jeep and a loader, fed shells toward the breech on a careful mechanical beat. The cargo hold stopped looking like a transport and started to feel like a flying artillery position. Transport pilots watched the modifications with a mix of awe and pure terror, the Gooney Bird they'd flown for years now bristling with cannons and racks. They ran fingers along new welds, swallowed, and imagined flak curtains blooming like deadly flowers. To fly, it meant turning a gentle freighter into a target. It meant deliberately diving into the teeth of German anti-aircraft fire. The pilots stared in stunned silence. Every lesson they'd learned in flight school said otherwise. You don't fly low. You don't loiter. You don't present a slow, lumbering target begging for flak. And yet that's the plan. Fly low, fly slow, and make yourself the biggest, most obvious target in the sky. It was desperate, it was audacious, and somebody still had to make it shoot. The final piece was ugly, fiddly, and absolutely vital: wires. The engineers fed heavy-gauge cable through the C-47's ribs, snake-like, past fuel lines, and loose insulation, stapling and sleeving every span. They spliced into the cannon's firing solenoid, ran return leads to the cockpit, tested continuity with a hand meter, labeled each run, and bolted the feed to a switch within reach of the co-pilot, one small circuit between survival and catastrophe. They bolt the trigger into the co-pilot's yoke, wires tucked and soldered through the cockpit. On the first try, the circuit spits fire, blue sparks, a loud pop, and a volley of curses that fills the hangar. A mechanic slaps a panel. They breathe, curse, and steady the connections. No one laughs now. They swap gloves, nod, and try again, because one clean circuit means one more chance to fly home. The first try had produced only sparks and a string of curses. On the second, a satisfying clink rang out from the cannon breech, and everything in the hangar seemed to hold its breath. For a stunned second, they just listened, metal settling, hands still, the little shock of relief spreading like heat. The trigger worked. They could actually fire a tank cannon from the cockpit. Gratified laughter broke the tension, but it was thin and serious. This was not a prank anymore. Plans that had felt impossible started to line up in their heads. Outside, the sky was paling toward dawn, and the Gooney Bird looked, somehow, ready. At first light, the work is done, but they keep going. They bolt on. 50 caliber machine guns, sweating over each mount. They strap rocket tubes, ripped from battered fighters, beneath the wings and jury-rig firing rails where none should be. Scrap metal becomes teeth. Rivets scream under the strain. The old Gooney Bird that hauled rations now bristles with weapons, hulking and terrible, ready to hunt. The once gentle Gooney Bird has been transformed into something that looks wrong on paper and perfect on the runway. Riveted armor plates seam into the aluminum. A Sherman 75mm muzzle juts from the belly. 50 cals and rocket tubes bristle under the wings, and inside the hold the ammo racks stare back like teeth. It's a Frankenstein's monster of aviation, part transport, part gun platform, all menace. The men who sweat and cursed and welded through the night stand silent, part proud, part scared, and one of them, half laughing, half solemn, christens the machine with a name that fits the job: the Sky Reaper. He steps into the hangar expecting a prank. The engine sound is gone, only the clink of tools and the smell of oil. But the Gooney Bird in front of him is wrong, in the best possible way. Steel plates welded where canvas should be, a 75mm barrel jutting through the belly, scavenged rocket tubes under the wings. For a long, heartbeatless moment, he says nothing. His mouth parts. His hand finds the nearest rib and rubs it like a man checking if a ghost is real. The skepticism that walked in with him sits on the floor beside his boots, stunned. He stands very still, staring. For a long, suspended heartbeat, he studies the Frankenstein plane, the scavenged steel, the jury-rigged guts, and something in his jaw tightens skepticism, melting into a cold, grim understanding of what's at stake. He doesn't clap anyone on the back. He doesn't make a speech. Without fanfare or ceremony, he leans in, his voice flat and final. Test it. Those two words crack the hush like a shot. The joke is over. The secret experiment is suddenly official permission wrapped in peril, and everyone in the hangar knows the men who built this thing just put their names on the line. The overloaded Sky Reaper lumbers down the runway, taking off far more sluggishly than a normal C-47. Every rivet strains under the added weight. The engines cough and grind, flaps shuddering as the nose climbs reluctantly. Inside, hands grip straps, eyes flick to trembling instruments, one long, breathless stretch between engineering hubris and the test that will prove it or break it. The overloaded Sky Reaper circled low over the test range, wings groaning as frost sparkled on its skin. Below, a captured truck crouched like prey on the frozen earth. In the cabin, the crew went stone-still, hands white on cables, and engineers wrench forgotten mid-grip. Radio chatter fell away. For a breathless beat, the world narrowed to crosshairs and one impossible question: would this junkyard cannon fire or tear them apart? The co-pilot lines up the shot, his hand trembling, eyes locked on that battered truck below. He breathes, looks to the pilot, and gets a hard, steady nod. His finger finds the jury-rigged trigger. He pulls. For one suspended heartbeat, the whole plane seems to hold its breath. Can this lumbering beast really tame the cannon inside? A deafening, concussive roar fills the cabin, a sound no C-47 was ever meant to make. The floor bucks, instruments dance, and every rivet screams as the airframe shudders like it's been struck by lightning. Men are slammed into bulkheads. Coffee leaps from cups. For a heartbeat, the world narrows to metal, smoke, and the terrible, miraculous proof that the gun just worked. For a terrifying second, the engineer's worst fears hang in the balance. Welds whining, rivets protesting, the Sky Reaper heaving like a wounded animal. Then, impossibly, the reinforcements hold. The shaking eases, gauges jitter and steady, and the plane stays in one piece, followed by a stunned, breathless silence in the cabin. The shell screamed down and hit with a violent, horrible beauty, metal folded, diesel ignited, and the derelict truck blossomed into a column of black smoke and orange flame that shredded the winter quiet. The cabin rocked with the echo. For a beat, everyone stared, disbelieving. Then a wild, raw laugh broke out, followed by a careful, stunned silence as the men realized what they'd just done. The gun had fired, the plane had held, and a laughable idea had become something dangerous and real. It worked. The airborne gunship was born. The Sky Reaper's first real test comes in the frozen hell of the Ardennes in January 1945. A German armored column is spotted. Alarms scream. Crews shove jackets on, mechanics seal the last bolts, and the overloaded C-47 is shoved down a slick runway. Engines cough and then bite. It lifts, slow and lumbering, bearing a single impossible mission: intercept and stop that column before it breaks the line. Slow became its secret advantage. Where fighters made a single screaming pass and vanished, the Sky Reaper could hang circle, drift, and watch. Its lumbering pace let it trace the battlefield like a patient hawk, mapping every convoy gap and every exposed flank. Anti-aircraft threats that punished speed sometimes missed the slow, low silhouette. The crew could study patterns, pick the lead vehicle, time the shot, and then do it again. For once, staying in the sky longer was survival, and it turned a shaky cargo plane into a stubborn, persistent hunter. For the crew, it feels like stealing time from war itself. Where a fighter bomber rips past in a heartbeat, the Sky Reaper can circle, watch, and wait. Hours stretch into minutes as eyes scan the frozen tangle below tracks in the snow, smoke from an engine, the way dust and shadow betray movement. They mark targets, pick weak points, time shots to terrain and sun, and talk in clipped calls over the roar of engines. This patience turns fragility into advantage. Not speed, but endurance. Not surprise, but a carefully chosen moment, the calm before carnage they plan to unleash. After hours of circling, their slow speed stopped being a handicap and became a predator's patience. Now they dove. The pilot pushed the nose down through a curtain of flak, tracers stitching the sky into lines of fire. Instruments rattled. Men in the cabin went suddenly small and precise. The co-pilot steadied the sight, shoulders locked, eyes on a lone Panzer IV crawling across the white field. He exhaled, thumb finding the firing switch. Everything narrowed to that single trembling moment. He fires. The cannon answers with a thunder that rattles ribs and silence, then a projectile tears a white arc across the Ardennes. The 75mm slams into the Panzer's hull, metal crumples like paper, fuel and oil ignite, and a black mushroom of smoke and fire blooms up from the snow. For a heartbeat, the battlefield holds its breath. On the ground, German soldiers stare in disbelief. They had watched the sky for fast, screaming fighters. This lumbering cargo plane shouldn't be menacing. It was the kind of aircraft you'd pick out of the sky with a shotgun, slow, unarmored, a walking target. Yet here it is, roaring low, spitting fire where only tanks should fear. For a beat, they can't reconcile the image. A delivery truck turned warship of the sky. Training tells them to hold fire. Instinct tells them to run. Instead, they stand, frozen, as the impossible becomes deadly real. The attack was as much a psychological shock as a tactical one. Men on the ground stopped moving and stared up, because the math of war had just bent. Tanks that had seemed invulnerable were erupting in fire. Convoys faltered. Commanders barked new orders into a chaos that hadn't existed 10 minutes before. Fear spread through enemy ranks like a rumor. Something had changed, and they couldn't find the rulebook. For Allied troops, it was a strange, fierce hope proof that inventiveness could turn the tide. And back inside the battered Sky Reaper, there was no time to celebrate. The crew was already scraping spent casings into a tub, slamming home another round, and circling for the next pass. Inside the Sky Reaper, the crew moves like a single brutal instrument. Empty shell casings clink and skitter across the floor. A loader wrestles a 75mm round into the breech. Hands are quick, practiced, shaking only a little. Sweat and the smell of burnt prop wash hang in the air. Through the open hatch, the frozen ground slides by tracks, trees, the black shapes of armor, while the pilot holds a slow, punishing circle. They have the luxury a fighter never does. Time to watch, to aim, to breathe. They circle for another pass. They reload with practiced speed, slamming another round home, and the Sky Reaper leans in for the kill. The co-pilot squeezes the trigger. The 75mm booms again low, terrifying, impossibly precise. A Panzer's flank shatters, fuel and metal erupt. Men scatter, radios scream, vehicles spin into ditches. The convoy collapses into a chaotic tangle of smoke and twisted steel. Then the enemy recovers, concentrating a withering wall of flak on the lumbering target. Tracer lines stitch the sky. The Gooney Bird's thin aluminum sings holes, blooming like ugly metallic flowers across the fuselage. A loud thunk, a strip of insulation peels away. Alarms scream, instruments jitter. The pilot grits his teeth and fights the yoke. The co-pilot clamps a hand over the firing switch. In the cabin, loose tools tumble and a wrench skitters across the floor. Every bolt seems to count. For a terrifying heartbeat, the whole contraption feels like it's holding together by luck. Then they push on, heading home. Mission accomplished. The pilot noses the Sky Reaper away from the fight and points her home, every creak and groan of the overloaded airframe sounding like a confession. Holes pepper the aluminum like bad weather. A wingtip hangs with a stubborn, twisted grace. Inside, faces are streaked with oil and sweat, hands still clutching controls as if letting go might undo what they just did. There's no victory parade, just a raw, stunned kind of relief, the kind that tastes like cold coffee and spent shells. They land hard, taxi in on wounded tires, and when the crew climbs out, they don't shout. They stand for a long breath, battered, alive, and somehow victorious. Word of Captain Morgan's one-way engagement with the Panzer spread through headquarters like gossip fed to gasoline. First a terse radio call, then a clipped memo, then an officer's incredulous laugh, turning into a phone tree of urgent inquiries. Men who'd sneered at the mad cargo plane now read the after-action sketch, traced the scorched mark on film, and cleared their throats before ordering spare parts. The secret hangar became a point of pilgrimage. Brigadiers and logisticians arrived with questions and requisition forms. What had been a desperate, nameless experiment was suddenly stamped with brass, validated, replicated, and pushed into the light of official sanction. Word moves like wildfire through headquarters. The same stern-faced commanders who'd sneered at the idea, who'd called it reckless and suicidal, are suddenly on the phone, sharp and insistent. "Show me the reports," they demand. "Send the flight logs, the damage assessments, the crew statements." Files that were meant to stay hidden are pulled into bright lamplight. Jokes turn into memos. Questions turn into orders. Where there was contempt, there is curiosity. Where there was dismissal, there is urgency. The unofficial experiment has crossed a line. The thing that once seemed impossible is now official, and the tide has turned. The proof was undeniable. Word of that one impossible mission ripped through the airfields and command rooms, and then it trickled down to the grease-streaked sheds where the real work happened. In England and in battered Italian workshops, mechanics who'd never been given a blueprint started to reverse engineer the idea, scavenging mounts, fabricating cradles, adapting recoil systems to whatever metal they could find. News, sketches, and improvisations bounced between units. A field modification in one hangar became the starting point for a better rig in the next. Within weeks, the odd, outlaw gunship had become a contagious obsession, ready to be reimagined in a dozen new ways. Innovation didn't trickle in, it erupted. Teams in makeshift shops tore into C-47 seconds and stayed up for days, swapping cargo racks for cannon cradles, bolting on whatever steel they could find. Some pushed dual 37mm autocannons through reinforced hatches. Others cut the side doors open and mounted twin 50 cal machine guns to deliver a terrifying broadside. Each field mod had a signature, a jury-rigged sight here, an improvised ammo chute there. No two looked the same, but all of them did the same thing: turn a lumbering transport into a slow, relentless threat that could circle, aim, and pour fire down on tanks. By March 1945, as the Allies pushed deep into Germany, the Sky Reaper and its improvised cousins had become something between myth and weapon. Slow, ugly, and utterly relentless. They didn't blitz like fighters, they loitered, circling for minutes or hours, delivering one brutal, carefully aimed hammer blow after another until an armored column halted or a fortified position fell silent. Convoys learned to fear the lumbering shadow above. Battered infantry found a guardian that refused to leave. What began as a mad experiment in a cold hangar had rewritten air support, trading speed for persistence and turning a cargo plane into a mobile, overwhelming answer to battlefield steel. They escort frozen convoys down shell-pocked roads, hanging low and slow like a hawk that won't quit, strafing machine gun nests and spitting 75mm rounds into bunkers until the guns go silent. They lay down a curtain of fire that opens a corridor for trucks to pass. They hover over ambushed columns and throw themselves between dying men and German steel. And most important, they become a visible promise to troops under fire, a guardian angel in the sky whose presence steels exhausted soldiers on the ground. Because when everything else fails, The Sky Reaper refuses to leave them behind. This revolution in air warfare didn't come from committee reports or glossy briefings. It was hammered out on a concrete floor, lit by a single swinging bulb, by young mechanics whose hands were stained with oil and stubbornness. They bent scrap into purpose, turned boredom into obsession, and stitched armor onto a bird that had been built to carry bread, not shells. They argued, they laughed, they swore, and they risked everything on a wild, terrible idea, because the men in the mud needed something to look up to. It was messy, it was illegal, and it worked brutally, beautifully, and it changed the shape of air support forever. They didn't have patents or generals' approval. They had grease on their knuckles, flashlights in the rain, and that particular kind of stubborn hope that grows when friends are getting killed a few miles away. They scavenged armor plates from busted bombers, cannibalized firing gear, welded makeshift cradles by hand, and stayed up through the night, nursing a fragile math of recoil and balance. Every bolt was a promise. We won't let them go into that field unprotected. It was ugly, it was dangerous, it was desperate. And because it was born of urgency and loyalty, it worked just long enough to save lives. When World War II finally ended, the Sky Reaper and its kin didn't get a parade or a patent, they were quietly taken apart. Men in fatigues unbolted cannons, stripped armor, and tossed the odd salvaged gauge into a parts bin. There was no official program to catalog what worked, no ribboned rollout to etch their names into history. Paperwork went missing, photos stayed in wallets. The machines that had been miracles of necessity were reduced to scrap and stories. For the crews who rode them home, that silence felt like erasure. For everyone else, the gunships simply vanished back into the ordinary world. Their legacy lived in the low-light places where veterans gathered bar stools, reunion halls, and the back corners of old hangars told between sips, cigarette smoke, and the creak of memory. Photographs yellowed at the edges, oil-stained blueprints folded into wallets, and hands that had welded and flown trembled when the tale surfaced, half laugh, half shudder. There were no plaques, no official records, only ragged voices keeping a dangerous, brilliant secret alive. It was their audacity to build and their courage to fly that preserved the Sky Reaper, carried forward not in archives but in stories stubborn enough to refuse oblivion, an idea that powerful was impossible to kill. Years after the hangar fell silent and the men went home, the story kept turning up in briefing rooms, on the edges of maps, in the tired jokes pilots swapped between missions until it landed where it mattered, on a planner's desk in Korea. Night convoys were being picked off by invisible guns. Someone remembered the crazy cargo plane with a tank cannon and realized this wasn't folklore, it was a solution waiting for a problem. Desperation and memory married into purpose. The legend of the Sky Reaper moved from campfire tale back into the realm of urgent, practical possibility. That memory didn't stay buried. When the Air Force needed a way to hit moving targets at night in Korea's shadow, crews reached back into the dirty legend of the improvised C-47 gunship, and out of that reach came the AC-47, christened Spooky. Take a trusty transport, bolt in side-firing miniguns, and you get a plane that doesn't make a single pass. It lays down a sustained curtain of fire, a terrifying, surgical wall of lead that could pin, pulverize, and protect troops below. Crude and brilliant, it turned a desperate hack into a new doctrine of persistent air fire. It worked. The AC-47 Spooky didn't just scare the enemy. It proved that a lumbering transport could be turned into a predator, and once that door opened, nobody closed it. Engineers and crews chased the idea forward, fitting heavier guns, stronger mounts, and more persistent firepower into every new airframe. Out of that drive came the more powerful AC. 119 variants, the Shadow and the Stinger aircraft, built not as experiments, but as purpose-made gunships, harder hitting and more reliable, extending the concept's reach and setting the stage for even more advanced designs to come. It all reaches its thunderous apex in the AC-130J Ghost Rider, a flying fortress built for a very different century of war. Computerized targeting and sensors see through night, smoke, and storm. Precision-guided munitions and heavy cannons deliver brutal, measured force from a slow, patient platform that can loiter until a call for help comes in. Where fighters strike fast and vanish, the Ghost Rider hangs, watches, and answers again and again, shielding troops on the ground with a rain of accurate fire. Cold steel and cutting-edge electronics meet in the sky, a direct line from a desperate hangar experiment to today's unstoppable guardian. Every time a modern gunship circles silently over a battlefield, providing persistent, precise fire support to troops below, it traces its DNA directly back to that one impossible idea in a cold hangar. What began as a joke, an engine-warmed dare to turn a lumbering transport into a weapon, grew into a lineage of improvisation. Junkyard welds, jury-rigged recoil systems, pilots who learned to fly slow and fight slow. The sleek AC-130 seconds and their predecessors may look like science, but their heartbeat is grit, the stubborn refusal to accept can't, while comrades still needed a guardian in the sky. This legacy didn't arrive by committee or white paper. It grew out of soaked boots and open wrenches, late-night calculations scrawled on grease-streaked paper, and pilots who climbed into a plane they'd turned into something else entirely. A joke became a question became a bolt and weld obsession, and that small, desperate experiment rewrote how air power could protect troops on the ground. Mechanics kept tinkering, crews kept risking their lives, and over decades the crude Sky Reaper quietly evolved into the precise, computerized gunships of today. So when an AC-130 circles overhead, remember, sometimes the future of warfare is born from necessity and stubborn human audacity, ordinary people choosing to build a miracle.